most cities, dawn arrives gently, soft light gliding between apartment blocks, the rhythmic echo of early footsteps on quiet pavement, birds calling one another into a new day. But in Kensington, Philadelphia, morning takes on an entirely different character. Sunrise here does not awaken the neighborhood. It merely exposes what the night tried and failed to conceal. The streets don't start a new day. Instead, they remain fixed in a kind of weary suspension, as if even time itself hesitates to move forward. Under the dim, pale sky, the silhouettes of people begin to stir inside improvised shelters. Beneath cold overpasses, behind shuttered storefronts long abandoned by business, and along sidewalks that have unwillingly become bedrooms, bodies shift beneath thin blankets stiffened by the night air. Layers of worn clothing cling to fragile warmth. People rise not because rest has restored them, but because daylight has dragged them back into consciousness, reminding them that survival demands movement. The quiet here is a heavy, suffocating quiet, not the serenity of early morning, but the tense stillness of individuals gathering what little strength they have left. Before their feet even touch the ground, the battles have already begun. Many wake to cravings they wish they didn't carry, to memories they've tried to bury, to a loneliness that presses on their chest like an invisible weight. Their day starts inside their minds long before it starts on the street. And so the story begins, not with dramatic scenes or loud chaos, but with the muted ache of lives caught between endurance and exhaustion, survival and surrender. Kensington's dawn is an invitation and a warning. If you choose to look, you must be willing to truly see. For anyone watching a documentary about the homeless, this is where understanding begins. It asks viewers to slow down, to listen carefully, and, above all, to resist the instinct to turn away when reality becomes uncomfortable. Lives caught in an unending loop. The people who now sleep on these sidewalks carry histories that stretch far beyond what a passerby might assume. Many once framed houses as construction workers, rang up customers in retail stores, or cared for patients in crowded nursing wards. Some spent years tending to aging parents, others raised children on their own. Behind every face is a dream that once burned brightly. Dreams of steady work, of a warm home with lights that stayed on, of a life that felt grounded and dignified. But life rarely collapses in a single, dramatic moment. It cracks slowly, quietly, one hardship at a time, until the pieces no longer fit back together. One man tells his story in fragments, each sentence heavy with exhaustion. He has tried rehabilitation close to 20 times. Every attempt was honest, fueled by hope, fear, determination, or all three. But addiction does not surrender to willpower the way people imagine. The brain becomes a war zone where chemistry overwhelms intention, where cravings drown out logic, where survival instincts cling to substances that destroy. And when someone is discharged from treatment only to return to the same trauma, the same unstable housing, the same impossible pressures, the cycle repeats with brutal predictability. A woman nearby recounts her own unraveling. It started with untreated anxiety, then grew into depression that clouded every hour of her day. She missed shifts at work. Panic stole her focus. Eventually she lost her job, then her apartment, then the friends and family she once leaned on. The isolation became unbearable, a silence so deep it felt suffocating. Substances that dulled the pain, if only for a moment, became the only escape she could find. She never imagined she would end up on these streets. No one imagines it, but life backed her into a corner until this felt like the only space she had left. None of these stories are sensational. They are profoundly human, real people carrying invisible burdens, slipping through cracks they didn't even know existed until it was too late. Their suffering is often silent, gradual, unfolding over years without anyone noticing the warning signs. So when a viewer watches a documentary about the homeless, what they witness is not the sudden downfall of a person. It is the final chapter of a long series of failures. Failures of support, of access, of compassion, of systems that let people slip further and further away until all that remains is survival on the streets. A place the world forgot more. Kensington was not always synonymous with hardship and struggle. Decades ago, it was a vibrant working-class neighborhood, alive with the rhythms of daily life. Families bustling through front doors, small shops offering familiar wares, community centers echoing with laughter, and playgrounds filled with the joyful shouts of children. It was a place where generations lived, worked, and dreamed together, their lives interwoven into the fabric of the neighborhood. But the tides of economic change arrived like slow, relentless storms. Factories shuttered one by one, wages stagnated, and investment that once sustained local families quietly evaporated. Houses that had once stood as symbols of multi-generational pride fell into disrepair, their walls echoing the absence of the people who had once called them home. Eventually, many of these homes were abandoned altogether, leaving behind only their hollow shells. As employment opportunities vanished, so too did the social safety nets that had once provided stability. Stagnant wages could not keep pace with rising rents, and families who had once been rooted in the community found themselves pushed to the fringes. In these margins, a harsh new reality took shape, not one of thriving communities or shared prosperity, but one defined by survival, improvisation, and endurance. Life became a series of compromises: where to sleep, what to eat, how to preserve dignity when resources ran out. Walking down Kensington Avenue today is like entering a parallel world. The skyline of Philadelphia, bright and bustling in the distance, feels almost like a memory of another city, where storefronts once buzzed with commerce, boarded windows and crumbling facades now dominate the street. Playgrounds have vanished, replaced by empty lots that stretch out like open wounds, reminders of neglect and absence. Instead of families strolling together, small clusters of individuals move silently, each absorbed in their own thoughts, each carrying burdens invisible to the casual observer. This neighborhood is the product of decades of disinvestment, systemic inequality, and policies that overlooked warning signs until the crisis became inevitable. Yet, even amidst the despair, the resilience of humanity shines through. People share what little they have: food, water, blankets, with neighbors who have become like family. They watch over one another during bitterly cold nights, exchange advice, and know each other's stories in ways that outsiders rarely understand. In Kensington, community is not measured by resources, but by compassion, connection, and the quiet acts of care that sustain life when the world seems indifferent. This is Kensington, not merely a statistic, nor a headline, but a fragile, living home. And it is a place that asks those watching a documentary about the homeless to look beyond despair and recognize the strength, dignity, and humanity that persist even in the most challenging circumstances. The weight of invisible battles. In Kensington, those living without homes carry burdens that extend far beyond the obvious hardships of street life. They face not only the visible struggle for food, shelter, and warmth, but also the unseen weight of untreated mental health conditions, trauma, and deep, lingering emotional wounds. Some experience hallucinations, not as a result of moral failure, but because consistent medical care has always been out of reach. Others endure the relentless fog of depression, a condition so heavy that even the simplest tasks, a meal, a conversation, a step outside, become insurmountable mountains. There are those who cannot sleep for days on end, not from choice, but because anxiety and fear have made rest impossible. Every hour awake is a battle against an invisible enemy, a test of endurance that few outside this world can fully comprehend. The world often misunderstands these realities. Outsiders see choices where none truly exist. They interpret actions without context, judging behavior while ignoring the histories and traumas that shaped it. They observe symptoms but rarely recognize the causes beneath them. Yet, in quiet conversations beneath overpasses, or in the muted spaces along side streets, a clearer truth emerges. Most are not fleeing responsibility, they are fleeing pain. They are fleeing memories of loss, the gnawing shame of disappointing loved ones, and the terrifying fear of being permanently invisible to the world. Healing becomes an even steeper climb when society treats their suffering as a spectacle, or when media portrays them as statistics rather than human beings. This is why the tone of a documentary about the homeless carries immense weight. It can either restore dignity or deepen stigma, reveal humanity or eclipse it. And the people of Kensington, like all those who live in the margins, deserve nothing less than to have their humanity illuminated, understood, and honored. The parallel crisis, life without a home. Addiction tells only part of the story in Kensington. Interwoven with chemical dependency is a deeper, older struggle, the struggle to find safe, stable housing. Each morning, hundreds of individuals emerge from tents, doorways, and the shadowed corners of alleyways. They gather their meager belongings, tucking themselves against the cold, shielding their faces from both the weather and the judgment of a world that often refuses to see them. Beneath the train tracks, near Lehigh Avenue, long rows of tents stretch like a fragile neighborhood built from necessity. Within this makeshift community, people develop systems of protection and mutual aid. Blankets, food, and warmth are shared. Some take turns standing watch over one another's belongings. Others huddle near small fires, not just for heat, but for a fleeting sense of comfort and companionship. Life here is not a constant storm of chaos. Between moments of crisis, there are tiny, intimate gestures that reveal the persistence of humanity. Someone brushing their hair, patching a tattered jacket, or reading a found book under dim light. These actions are quiet assertions of dignity, evidence that even in the harshest conditions, people cling to the routines and rituals that make life feel recognizable. What outsiders often fail to see is that many residents here work part-time jobs, day labor, sporadic gigs, earnings that barely cover rent and vanish before the month ends. When wages cannot meet the basic costs of survival, homelessness becomes not a reflection of personal failure, but a reflection of structural failure. Society cannot expect individuals to rise when the floor beneath them is continuously sinking. For those watching a documentary about the homeless, this truth becomes a pivotal revelation. Homelessness is rarely about poor choices. It is overwhelmingly about poor options. It is a stark reminder that, in Kensington and beyond, stability is a luxury too often reserved for the fortunate, while resilience becomes the only currency for those left behind. The people who keep hope alive. Amid the hardship and despair, there are those who arrive each day carrying something far more powerful than judgment: compassion. Volunteers and community organizations traverse the streets of Kensington, offering meals, warm clothing, water, and medical supplies. They provide rides to shelters, appointments, and treatment centers, and they check in on individuals by name, not by circumstance or condition. In a world that often reduces lives to statistics, they insist on seeing the person, the story, the humanity beneath the struggle. Local outreach teams and community health workers move quietly but purposefully through the neighborhood. They know who recently lost a tent, who has an upcoming medical appointment, and who hasn't eaten in hours. Their work is painstaking and deliberate, because trust is something that must be earned, nurtured, and maintained, not demanded. Each interaction, no matter how brief, carries the weight of reassurance. You are seen. You are not alone. Some carry naloxone, an emergency medication capable of reversing life-threatening overdoses. They train others in its use, cultivating a network of vigilant care that extends from one person to another. In a neighborhood where hope is fragile, these acts, small, consistent, and uncelebrated, become beacons of survival. These gestures of kindness are often the brightest threads in Kensington's worn tapestry. They remind those who feel invisible that they still matter, that their lives are worth attention, care, and protection. And for viewers of any documentary about the homeless, they deliver a vital lesson. Meaningful solutions emerge from human connection, understanding, and shared responsibility, not from judgment, condemnation, or indifference, the roots of a widespread crisis. To understand the challenges of today, one must trace the roots of the crisis back through decades of structural inequality, economic, racial, and social. The plight of Kensington did not arise overnight. It is the product of long-term patterns. Wages frozen for years while housing costs skyrocketed, mental health care chronically underfunded, and communities left to struggle without adequate support. Each of these factors alone is daunting, but together they create a perfect storm, a system in which vulnerable people fall through widening cracks that eventually become deep, nearly insurmountable chasms. Historical housing policies compounded the problem. Entire neighborhoods were systematically denied access to loans, investment, and infrastructure. Redlining and discriminatory zoning left lasting scars, producing cycles of poverty that persist across generations. Companies raised rents faster than incomes could keep pace, while affordable housing complexes were demolished with little to no replacement. The city expanded upward, its skyline growing taller, but not outward in compassion, leaving those at the margins increasingly isolated and exposed. For people who lose their homes, the consequences extend far beyond the loss of shelter. Safety nets fray and vanish, parents, friends, and partners drift away, not from lack of love, but because exhaustion, fear, or incapacity makes support impossible. Isolation deepens, vulnerability compounds, and the spiral of hardship accelerates. Certain groups feel these pressures more acutely. Seniors surviving on fixed incomes, single mothers juggling impossible budgets, LGBTQ+ youth rejected by their families, and individuals recently released from incarceration who find no welcoming door, all face an uphill battle with few resources. The system often expects these groups to succeed while denying them the tools necessary to do so. Yet, when seen through the careful lens of a documentary about the homeless, these harsh realities become clear to viewers. Homelessness is not a failure of character, nor a collection of bad decisions. It is the outcome of multiple failures converging at once: policy failures, economic stagnation, social neglect, and a lack of support structures. Recognizing this shifts understanding from blame to empathy, from judgment to awareness, and ultimately toward the possibility of meaningful action. Moments of light in a place of shadows. Even in the harshest corners of Kensington, fleeting moments of humanity pierce the darkness. A man, noticing someone shivering nearby, gives away his last pair of gloves. A woman, seeing another who has gone without food all day, shares what little remains of her meal. Someone tidies the area where they sleep, not because anyone demanded it, but because maintaining dignity matters, even when the world seems indifferent. These gestures are quiet, almost imperceptible, yet their impact is profound. They remind us that the people living here are not defined solely by hardship or addiction. They experience the full spectrum of human emotion: joy and sadness, fear and hope. They laugh over inside jokes, share stories from childhood, and whisper dreams they have not yet let go of. Small victories occur every day, often unnoticed by the wider world. Someone reconnects with a family member they thought lost. Another secures a critical case management appointment, opening a door to support and stability. A person finally sleeps through the night for the first time in weeks, or decides to attempt treatment once more, not because they were forced, but because someone offered guidance, encouragement, and belief in their potential. These are the moments that matter. They are the sparks that rebuild spirits and restore a sense of purpose in lives battered by hardship. In every documentary about the homeless, these flashes of light serve as the emotional heartbeat, grounding viewers in the reality that even in places marked by despair, resilience, kindness, and hope endure. Toward a better future, what could work? Real solutions to homelessness exist. They are tangible, actionable, and backed by evidence. They are not quick fixes, but they are approaches that work when implemented with consistency, compassion, and persistence. One of the most effective models is housing first. This approach provides stable housing without preconditions, offering individuals a foundation from which they can begin to rebuild their lives. Research consistently shows that when people have a safe place to sleep, their chances of recovery, employment, and long-term stability increase dramatically. Housing is not a reward, it is the starting point for human dignity, health, and hope. Cities can also make transformative use of resources already available. Vacant lots could become affordable housing developments. Minimum wages could be raised to align with the real cost of living. Mental health services can be expanded, community-based treatment centers established, and more crisis response teams trained to meet people where they are. These measures do more than provide temporary relief. They create pathways to lasting change. Education and vocational programs play an equally vital role. Skills training, apprenticeships, and accessible job programs can open doors to independence, helping individuals regain confidence and purpose. Strengthening public transportation ensures that work, healthcare, and support services are reachable, not out of reach. Long-term case management can stabilize progress, helping people maintain momentum rather than slipping back into survival mode. None of these solutions require reinventing society. They require commitment, empathy, and sustained investment. For those watching a documentary about the homeless, these strategies provide more than hope. They offer a blueprint for action. a reminder that change is possible when communities choose to act, and a call to see the people behind the statistics as neighbors, citizens, and human beings worthy of dignity and opportunity. A call to see, a call to care. At the heart of this story lies a message both simple and profound. The people struggling on the streets are human beings, deserving of dignity, respect, and compassion. They are not invisible, nor are they lost causes. They are neighbors, community members, and individuals whose lives matter just as much as anyone else's. We are not powerless in the face of this reality. Advocacy for better housing policies, support for local organizations, volunteering time, donating resources, or simply extending everyday kindness. These actions, small as they may seem, create ripples that can change lives in ways that statistics cannot capture. Every gesture of care, every moment of recognition reminds those living in hardship that they are seen and valued. When you watch a documentary about the homeless, you are not simply witnessing a crisis unfold, you are being offered an opportunity to act. It is a chance to choose empathy over judgment, understanding over indifference, and hope over despair. These stories are invitations to confront uncomfortable truths and to acknowledge that change begins with awareness and compassion. Kensington is more than a neighborhood in Philadelphia. It is a mirror reflecting the values, priorities, and conscience of society. And when we look into that mirror, it asks one critical question: will we look away, or will we care enough to step forward, to rewrite the story, and to ensure that every life, no matter how fragile, is given the chance to thrive